So I meant to do that. I meant to do that sooner. Sorry.
Perfect. So I'm going to start with a PowerPoint that just explains how to make a single welt pocket. Feel free to chime in with questions. And then we're going to do a live demo where I've got a little scrap and we're just going to make one right here. I like to do both of these in case your learning style is better, you know, seeing things written down versus seeing things acted out in front of you. But if your learning style is questions, then feel free to jump in with questions at any point in time. I've just explained this in a way that makes sense to me. If it doesn't make sense to you, then I'm sure people who watch this afterwards will have the same question. So feel free to jump in. Okay. So here is our quick PowerPoint. Great. So this is a single welt pocket. Here are the basics. Number one, first things first, you got to select and prepare your materials. A big portion of that is just deciding where you want your pocket to go. These pockets work really well on pants, sort of on the seat of your pants. You often see them on the back, but you can also put them in the other direction. So for these pants, I've got a horizontal double welt pocket on the butt. And then I have a vertical double welt pocket that sits right next to the side seam. So that goes in like so. This goes in horizontally. You can do this either way. It just depends on what you need. It depends on, you know, how you like your pockets to fall on your garment. For what I've cut right here, you can see that my pocket is a couple inches wider than my opening is going to be. And the piece I cut for my pocket is really, really long. Basically, this is because this is going to fold up and become the pocket in one of our final steps. You can do this with two pieces if you just want to use scraps. I had a really long scrap, so I'm going to do this nice, easy way where I cut something that is double in one direction and just a little bit wider than I want my opening to be in the width direction. Perhaps you can see I've drawn some blue lines on this piece. I don't have any iron-on interfacing with me, but this works really well if you put a piece of iron-on interfacing onto your lining material, just right around where you want the pocket opening to be. That makes it really crisp. That makes it sort of last really long, really nicely. You can see in my final finished material, the pocket flap that I've got, it's not crisp. It could get a little saggy if I wash it. It could get a little wrinkled. If I wanted to do this on, say, business pants, if I wanted to do this on a more professional suit jacket, I would want to apply iron-on interfacing to my pocket lining material to make something that's going to lie really, really flat. So we're not going to do that today, but it is a good step. It is a good idea if you want to make something really nice and tailored. The next step is that we're going to mark our pocket opening. I am basically in this step just drawing a long rectangle onto my fabric, and that's going to be centered around where I want the pocket opening. On both of these two pieces of material on the screen, I've drawn an opening that's 4 inches wide in one direction and 5/8 of an inch in the other direction. This can change if you want something specific. You know, I use these pads when I'm at work. If I wanted to create a pocket that would hold this pad, I could measure the size of this. I could add maybe a 1/2 inch to a 3/4 of an inch on either side, and I could draw an opening that would fit this exactly. So just because we are working with 4 inches by 5/8 of an inch in this moment doesn't mean you have to do it. It can be whatever size you want. In addition to that box that I'm drawing, I'm also going to draw a middle line just down the center of that box. And I should be prepared to have this be my cut line. I'm going to lose everything inside this rectangle. You can see here your pocket lining material is visible inside the rectangle box when you are done. So you can either match it, you know, knowing that this is going to be here, or if you have a part of the design that you really want to save, maybe don't put that inside the box. You're going to lose everything there. You should be marking this box on the front side of your garment and on the back side of your interfacing, of your lining. So if you've put interfacing onto your lining material, You're going to be drawing over the interfacing, and then you're going to be drawing on the exterior of your garment. Feel free to stop me if this is getting confusing. Great. For the next step, that's where I am in my little demo piece right here. You're going to pin your lining to your exterior. I think I put pocket on the slide, but pin your lining to your exterior. And you're going to want to match up the 4 corners of the box exactly. So wherever the 4 corners are on your exterior fabric, match them to your lining material. I've done it with pins, and then I've just folded it back so I can double check that they are correct. If you don't do this, you might wind up with a slightly wonky pocket, something that's a little bit uneven. So don't be afraid to double check, peel it back, make sure that it all matches nicely before you proceed. The next step, super simple. Sew around all 4 sides of that box. You've got those 4 corners, sew around all of them, and then backstitch in each corner. When you turn each side, do a little maybe backstitch to start, backstitch to finish, because we're going to cut into those corners. So it's a good idea to have a little bit of extra stitching in that area. You don't want it to unravel after you cut and then have to go back and fix it. So. Next, you're going to cut your pocket opening. This is kind of the scariest bit because you're cutting into your fashion fabric, you're cutting into your exterior. Basically, you're going to cut down that line you drew in the center of the box. The only sort of quirky thing is that you're going to cut diagonal lines into all 4 corners. So you're going to stop maybe about a 1/4 inch to a 1/2 inch away from the short ends, and then you're going to cut diagonal lines into all 4 corners so that you have 2 little triangles on all ends, and then 2 big flaps that run down the center. And you're really going to want to get into those corners. If you're cautious in this step, you'll have to go back and repeat it later. So that's why the back stitching is really helpful, because it allows you to get really precisely into the corners during this step. Check on the chat. V says, will you send out the PowerPoint? Yes, I will. I'm sorry I didn't ask, or I didn't see when you asked if this was on the right slide.
I think it was lining up. I think there was a slight lag, but it's good.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, cool. So then you're going to flip everything to the back. Once you've got your cut, you're going to move all of this material that you've been, stitching with right sides together. You're going to feed it all through the hole so that it's all hanging out on the back. It might be a little bit wonky when you start. That's what you can see over on the right side of the screen. So then you're going to take it over to your ironing board and press it flat. If your corners are really bunchy in this stage, that means you didn't cut deep enough when you were cutting your diagonal lines. So then you'll just have to open it up, cut a little bit deeper, press it, double check if you've gone far enough. If you haven't, open it up again, cut a little bit deeper, press it until you have it laying really nice and flat. So this is pretty simple, but it's sometimes a little finicky. It's sometimes a little scary as you have to cut closer and closer to your seam, but don't be afraid. Get a good sharp pair of scissors and it'll make your life easier. This is maybe one of the weirder steps also. This is what trips a lot of people up. This is the moment when you can make either a single welt pocket or a double welt pocket. I've just done a single here because I think it's much easier to grasp your first time, but when we're doing it in the demo, we can play around. Basically what you're doing is you are picking up a pinch of material on the backside. You're just working with that pocket lining material. You're picking up a 1/2 inch pinch of material and you are laying it down flat over the pocket opening. So this is what will be seen as the flap in your final product. So you just pick up your little pinch, you lay it down, you pin it into place. I'm gonna check the chat, looks like there's a question. Should you tack the inside part down so it doesn't shift if you are doing it for shirt pockets? I would definitely, pin liberally throughout this, but we're gonna be moving around a lot of these inside parts. We're gonna be playing with them in extra steps, so I wouldn't stitch anything down permanently. In our next step, now we are going to do stay stitching around all 4 sides of the pocket opening. You return to the front side and you're gonna stay stitch around all 4 sides. This will turn this little pinch of fabric into a proper welt opening in this step. So this is basically what creates the final visual. It's gonna look finished from this step on from the front, and you'll just be playing with the back from all other steps. There are some ways to do this. If you don't want to do stay stitching, you can certainly find tutorials online that skip this step. I think it's just the quickest way to secure your welt. Then you're going to pick up the long tail you've been working with, fold it all the way to the top of the material, and that's going to create your pocket. Then you're going to be creating your little opening. Pin that into place, adjust it, play with it as you need it to make sure it's the right length. Then you're going to stitch all 3 sides of the pocket. You don't need to stitch the bottom because that was just folded up. And then in this step, it's important to fold your exterior fabric away so that you're not stitching through all 3 layers. You're just stitching through the 2 layers of the pocket. You don't want to secure it because you want the invisible pocket look. So just, fold your garment away from your pocket. Just do the side seams. Fold it down, just do the top seam, and then you're done. It's simple when you get into it, but there's a lot of steps. So I've got a little demo for us to work with here today. I would love it, Matt, if you could now spotlight the hand cam. I
did that. I think if you just
Great.
you
I'm going to stop sharing.
Yeah.
Great. There we are. Okay, let's flip this around. Okay. First, let's go like this. And let's go.
There you go.
Yeah. Great. Okay. So I would encourage you to unmute yourself and ask questions during this stage. We're being recorded, but I'm sure people at home have the exact same questions as you. So feel free to chime in as we go through this process. So I have already marked my red line. I've already marked my box that is 4 inches in one direction and 5/8 of an inch in the other direction. So as we agreed, my first step is going to be to stitch around all 4 sides of this box, making sure that I backstitch in each of the corners so that we are able to cut into them. So I've done that both on what is the wrong side of my pocket material. We've got this pretend blue interfacing that I drew on there. And I've also done that on the right side of my fashion fabric. So. And I'm going to stitch in bright pink thread over here in the hopes that it'll be more visible on camera. With right sides together, I have just gone around with bright pink thread and I have stitched all 4 sides of my box. Now I'm ready to cut. I've drawn little diagonal lines in the corners here. So I'm just gonna cut down the center, and then I'm gonna get all 4 corners. And I'm gonna get really deep into those corners with my sharpest, tiniest scissors. If you have, scissors that are really good for embroidery, something where the tips are really sharp, this is a good moment to use them. And I'm just cutting the front and back together as if they were one material.
Anna, hi, it's Karen. I have a question.
Hello, please ask.
Hi. Yes, thanks. I was curious about the thread that you're using.
Yes. This is just basic 100% polyester thread. I do prefer to stitch with cotton, but this was the brightest color that I had. I would make sure that you go with something that's really sturdy. If I have thread that's been laying out for a long time, I like to test it. I think we've done this in a couple past sessions where you just kind of pull on it a little bit. And if it easily snaps, then I don't think this would be a good thread to use. But otherwise, just all-purpose sewing thread is perfect for this.
Okay, and there's no need to necessarily match cotton thread to cotton fabric, etc., right?
I like to do that just as a, little nice sewing technique, but I don't think so. I think, polyester thread is often a little bit stronger, and you can get a really nice variety of colors. So I would just make sure that it's nothing too bulky. I wouldn't use a heavier weight thread. I wouldn't use a button thread, just something light and strong.
Great, thanks.
Of course. So now I've got my cuts. You can see it looks like little carrots on either end and just a nice long straight cut in the middle. And I'm gonna push all of this extra material to the back. Feed your whole pocket into this center. Then you're gonna wind up with something that in the beginning is pretty lumpy, pretty creased. I'm gonna head over to the ironing board, just press it out. And if these corners stay kind of creased, if they stay pretty lumpy, that's a sign that I didn't cut deep enough. So I'll just jump back in here and cut a little bit deeper into the corners. This is often something I have to do because I don't want to cut what I've done. But you can see maybe there's just a little bit of distance. It's like a 1/16 of an inch of distance between where I cut and that hot pink thread. I gotta get it. I gotta get every little bit if I want a pocket that lays nice and flat. You really don't want to cut your stitching, but if you've done back stitching, then you know that it's secure enough that you can really get in there.
I was just going to ask, if you do cut through the stitching, do you have to worry about it, and how do you correct it?
If you just cut through it a little bit, I have certainly ignored it before, but if you start to see it unraveling on either side of your cut, if you're losing thread, then I would say it's a little bit of a problem. Then I would get back in there maybe with a needle and thread and just do some hand stitches to make sure that the area is secure. Just replace what you cut with a needle and thread. And sometimes you might want to make just like a couple small cuts if your scissors are a little bit dull. That is not ideal, but perfectly doable. Okay. And feel free to talk amongst yourselves while I quickly press this out. I realize it does take a second longer than it should.
Another question is, if you have bulkier, heavier fabric, are there any things that help on that?
I would say in that case, make sure that you cut out or I'll come back over, cut out maybe even more than a single line. Removing fabric from the area is always going to make it flatter. So here. So I'm gonna go back, press this out more, but instead of just cutting a single line, I might cut out a small carrot from each corner, just a little sliver of extra, loss that can help remove bulk. You can see my first pass, I've still got these creasy corners. That means I've got to go back in and cut more. I'm just going to do it by folding the top corner of the pocket down, seeing what material is still there and cutting into it. This way you can kind of see what is giving you trouble. And what you should do is just make a cut, check to see if it lays flat just by finger pressing. And if it does, then you're probably good. So I'm going to do the same over here, just kind of wiggle it around. And if it is flat now, then you're probably good. Take it back over to the ironing board, press it out again, and I'll be right back. Okay. So then you've got what just looks like a little window that you've made in your fabric. This is the box you drew on there. As I said, you're going to lose everything inside the box. So if you want a big, bold pocket, you can make a larger box. If you want a really tiny pocket, also, accommodate there. This is the moment when you could make either a single welt pocket, like I did right here with one flap that goes down, or a double welt pocket, as you often see on pants, that has a little flap at the top and a little flap at the bottom. So this is when you should decide. I'm going to show you a single welt pocket today, but we'll just talk about double welts as well. So from here, you flip it over. This is when you're going to make your pinch of material. This is when you're just going to pick up a little bit of your pocket, create a little pinch, and lay it right down to make what looks like your flap on the other side. If I were making a double welt pocket, I would pick up a smaller pinch. I'm just going to pin this in for show. Make one pinch on the bottom that takes up half the space. And then I would make another pinch at the top. Another pinch at the top. Take up the other half. And you can see on the outside, those two pinches would give you that look of a double welt pocket. But we are going to do single welt today. So I'm going to remove those pins. Because the sides of our box were 5/8 of an inch, the pinch I am making is going to be exactly 1/2 inch, and that will make sure that it is not too big. It's not bigger than the opening, and it's just going to lay flat. So I'm going to start just by pinning that out. It's a good idea to double check that you haven't accidentally canted your pocket in one direction or another in this step. If you don't pin straight of grain here, you can wind up with a wobbly pocket. Not the end of the world, but always a good idea to make sure that everything is still smooth, laying flat. So now I've got my pocket flap in, and I'm going to stay stitch all 4 sides of the box. This is going to catch this pinch on the top and bottom and create this flap right here. This is also a good moment to play with the needle setting on your sewing machine. I've got mine pushed all the way to the left. So when I'm just doing this edge stitching, it's going to be really small. If I put it in the middle, then I have to line this up really precisely. If I push my needle all the way over, then it's a little bit easier for me.
Do you backstitch the corners, Anna Rose?
You certainly can. I am realizing I should have done this from the front of the material also. That would be much easier. If you're hard on pockets, if you're somebody who knows that they often rip through the edges of pockets, if that is a problem for you, I would definitely consider backstitching the corners. But if you're not, if you're just looking for something that's really invisible, in that case, I would not necessarily backstitch them. It's about whether or not you want to add that bulk and whether or not you need that bulk. So, we talked a little bit in our last pocket class about adding additional material to the back sides of the corners of your pockets. We talked about adding little pieces of material in the top corners. If you're somebody who's really hard on pockets, you can also do that as well. So I started stitching on the back, but I'm actually going to do it on the front so that I can line up the edges really neatly. If you've had to cut away some of your actual seam when you were cutting your corners, backstitching in the corners now can be a way of adding additional stability to the edges of this. So because I had to get in pretty deep into all 4 corners, I did backstitch here. And I think this will provide a little bit of additional stability and make up for any stitches that I might have lost in that cutting step. So in this case, I think it is probably a good idea. I am just going to trim away now my extra threads. And so in this case, V says, I have some shirts that don't have pockets and I want to add them using this technique. They are cotton. Would you recommend a certain type of fabric for the pocket since I can use anything as it doesn't have to match the shirt? Yes, absolutely. For making a pocket, I would recommend a really lightweight material because you don't want to add a lot of extra bulk. You don't want to be able to see the edges of this pocket underneath your shirt. So I would pick something like a light sheer cotton. This is a lining weight cotton. You can almost probably see my hand through it. And then I would use that iron-on interfacing. I would cut the interfacing 2 inches larger than my pocket opening and line that up on all 4 sides. So I'd have the stability of the interfacing where the flap is, but I'd have the light sheerness of the pocket. So it'll just be invisible underneath the garment. And this I just bought as lining material. It is cotton, it is pretty sheer. It's a woven, you know, I wouldn't go with a knit or anything. I just make sure that it washes the same way as your shirt does. So if you have, you know, a red lining material, I'd make sure that it's not going to bleed in your laundry. Or if you have something that's like a silk pocket, that can be really dreamy, but make sure your silk is washable as your exterior is. But something lightweight that you can iron a piece of interfacing onto will work perfectly. So now at this stage, we've got our little flap. I'm gonna flip over. We're gonna take advantage of this long tail we've got, and we're gonna fold it up to create the pocket. I like to make sure that it's lined up pretty precisely on the top and sides, and then maybe inch it down as I want. If you have a particular idea, like you want to put your cell phone in your pocket, it's a good moment to, you know, grab your phone and put it right down. If you want to fit your keys in here, this is the moment where you decide how big this pocket's going to be based on where you put your side seams. So double check, you know, that this pocket is going to achieve what you want it to do before you stitch into it. So just for demo, this is great. I'm going to pin this on the sides. And along the top. And I am just pinning through the pocket. I have pinched my pocket lining material and I'm not pinning through the exterior. Just lifting up and pinching. And this is also how I'm going to stitch. So for this step, you want to be really sure that you're not going through the outside. So, you know, if I were working with a garment, I would pick up my pocket, I would hold the front and back of my pocket, and I would make sure that I can see that I don't have the garment. I'd fold it all the way back, make sure before I feed it into the sewing machine, because I've made this mistake too many times before, that it is nowhere near. For the side seams, I'm going to do the same thing again, just hold my pocket by the front and back, make sure I've really pushed away the exterior fabric. And you can see that I've now stitched on all 3 sides of the pocket. And since the bottom is a fold, that means we have a completely enclosed pouch on the back of our textile. So I'm going to cut away a little bit of the excess. You don't have to do this if you're, you know, putting this on a winter jacket. Certainly you don't need to cut away excess, but I'm pretending that I'm working with a lightweight cotton exterior. So I'm just going to trim along the top. Maybe trim out the corners a little bit, make sure that there's nothing too bulky on the back. Make sure you don't catch your exterior fabric when you do this. Then I might take this back over to the ironing board and press it out, but otherwise then you are done. You have a pocket that is completely enclosed, ready to go on the front of your material with this little bit of material showing, but otherwise there's no other indication. There's no stitches on the bottom or the sides. This is a single welt pocket. So Matt, if you could stop the hand cam highlight, let's talk about it. Let's talk about sewing and other things. Okay.
I have a dumb question.
Please
because
ask it.
I
No dumb
have never
questions.
sewed before, but like if I wanted to add a pocket that's like a different color to a t-shirt, but have it be on like the outside,
Yeah.
you would just cut out the pocket and then sew it like like right on it.
Absolutely. Here, let me pull. I have a couple dresses that are hanging out next door to me in case questions come up. So I would call that maybe like a patch pocket. And the rules for preparing your patch are the same as they are in the video we did on patching. Cut your material, make sure it's at least a 1/2 inch larger on all sides, fold it over, press it, and then just do edge stitching along the sides that you want it to be secured on. This one has a little V-shaped at the bottom. You can certainly do a flat bottom or a U bottom. I would maybe find a shirt you like and trace the size of that pocket, add a 1/2 inch to either side, fold them over, stitch it down.
Thank you.
And we can talk about that next time. I think this is going to be the summer of pockets. So we can absolutely do a patch pocket and a side seam pocket. I saw V's question about that. The side seam pocket, if you're doing a welt pocket, it's almost exactly the same thing. I think next time we are going to do invisible side seam pockets, which are a little bit different. In that case, you make a little pouch and you just add it to your side seam essentially. But for the welt, because you've got this bit of material that hangs out on the front, basically all of the steps we did were really just preparing to have this little bit of material. So if you happen to have the same cloth as they did with these pants, you know, it almost looks like maybe this is the same material and you just stitched it or something, but it's not. These little nubs on either side of the pocket are, you know, the lining material that are coming forward. So, but yeah, if I were doing this horizontally or vertically instead of horizontally, I would do the same steps. I would just, you know, shift my textile I was working with. So you could do invisible for a shirt pocket too. For the invisible pockets like this, you need a seam to do it on. That's what you do is you open up your seam, you slip the pocket in, and then you redo the seam. So if you don't have a seam to work with, if you're trying to do it, say, as like a little chest pocket, it would be more difficult because you don't have the sort of edges to attach it to. You could certainly, you know, try and create a seam in this area. You could make something happen, most definitely. Sort of create like a little yoke for your garment. But the easiest way to add, say, a chest pocket would either be a patch pocket or a welt pocket. It would be very difficult to do one of these side seam pockets without adding a seam. Yeah.
So where did you get your fabric with the greens and all that?
Oh, this fabric? Yeah, this is from a quilt collection that was supposed to look like 1930s quilt material. I think it was called Aunt Grace. That's what I see on the little selvage edge. I got it from a store in Cranston, Rhode Island that I think is called Fabrics or just Fabrics. It's almost impossible to remember what to type into Google because it is so simple. But it's got a good collection of quilting cottons. So I got this and a couple other 1930s reproduction fabrics there that are kind of fun to work with.
Yeah, no, that's a fun one. I hadn't seen anything like that recently, so.
A friend of mine said it looked like the Statue of Liberty's fake eyelashes. So I have always been very fond of it for that specific reason. So, yeah. Yeah. Let's see.
Well, if there are no more questions, we could end for the day.
Yeah, we can end the recording, definitely. And Mary, do you want to talk about quilts? You're here. You